Switzerland, which I carry in my heart. The beauty of Switzerland is immeasurable. It does not depend on a specific city or a well-known place. Switzerland must be felt in the heart and carried with you wherever you are. Whoever truly understands, Switzerland touches something deeper, the meaning of life, dreams, silence that speaks more than 1,000 words. Switzerland is not just a country, it is magic, romance, and awe at what is timeless. It is the mountain peaks that teach humility and the valleys where one can find oneself. I have visited this country in many ways, by car, boat, train, and in winter on skis. I watched with admiration the majestic Jungfrau and the unique Matterhorn. I spent quiet evenings in St. Moritz. Everyone has their favorite place. I simply love them all. Summer and winter. Understanding Switzerland is not easy, even when one visits often. Although I come from Poland, for over 10 years I have been returning here regularly, sometimes just for coffee, but always with a heart full of admiration. This book is the fulfillment of my travel experiences. It is a story built from moments, scents, images, and emotions. It is also the completion of my childhood dream and the culmination of my final paper on Switzerland, which I wrote as part of my MBA studies. This is my personal journey. I invite you, reader, to join me. This book is not a typical guidebook. You will not find dry data on accommodation prices or a list of restaurants recommended by algorithms. That is not the point. This is a review of places worth knowing, but not in the way they are usually written about. I do not suggest where to sleep because I believe that everyone travels in their own way. Everyone stays where their heart tells them. Sometimes in a hotel with a view of the Alps, sometimes in a car under the stars, and sometimes just for a moment, stopping somewhere along the way. This book is for those who are not just looking for information, but for emotions, memories, and a personal rhythm of discovering Switzerland. First encounter. The beginning of my adventure with Switzerland is a moment that will forever remain in my memory. It was only a few days, yet it was enough to see the true face of this country. It was then that I first got to know Zermatt, the Furka Pass, St. Moritz, and the Simplon Pass, places that will forever remain special to me. I remember that friends had warned me earlier, joking, "In Switzerland, there's an unpleasant smell." I didn't understand what they meant then. Only years later did I realize they were talking about a specific smell, the smell of hot breaks in the mountain passes. It was evening. We were just descending from the legendary Furka Pass. My uncle was driving the car, a professional driver, experienced, but driving through real mountains for the first time. He was learning then how to properly use the brakes during a long, steep descent. We didn't want to go through Italy, so we chose the route through the pass, with its sharp turns, endless serpentines, and the need for constant braking. The car gained speed with every minute. My uncle kept braking, controlling every movement. When we reached the bottom, we got out of the car, and then we smelled that characteristic scent. We looked. The brake discs were glowing red. That was the first warning. In Switzerland, when using mountain passes, you need to know how to brake. Carefully, wisely, with respect for the forces of nature. There, every road can be a lesson and an adventure. The road to Zermatt. The beginning of a true journey. My journey through Switzerland began at the Simplon Pass and the town of Zermatt, from where we set off towards the famous Matterhorn. Didn't expect then that this expedition would absorb me so much and that I would return to it for years to come. At the beginning, I was not prepared either physically or mentally, not only for long hikes in the mountains, but also for something I had not known before, the change in altitude. Until then, the highest elevations I had walked on were perhaps 2,000 meters, and here peaks that rise around you like living monuments of nature. Even by car, I had never driven so high before. It was then that I felt that something here was different, that it's not just a landscape, it's a space that affects a person from within. The most important thing, however, was the meeting with Zermatt, a town at the end of the valley, quietly nestled at the foot of the majestic Matterhorn. It was like discovering another world, a world that doesn't need words to impress. That day changed my life forever. Especially the first trip to climb Matterhorn and admiring the power of the Matterhorn up close. I took my first serious photo then. I remember how I positioned myself for the shot and someone accidentally captured that moment. I was surprised, enchanted by this place, about which I had only heard and read before. However, I never imagined that this mountain, so huge, majestic, moving, my childhood dreams were coming true. I thought I would only be here once. I took pictures from every side, from the cable car, absorbing every view. And then the first difficulties appeared. Breathing problems began. For the first time in my life, I was taking a cable car above 3,000 meters. I didn't even realize what that meant. I was riding the old cable car to climb Matterhorn then. I didn't know that a new route had already been launched in the meantime. The cars were large, accommodating over 100 people. The line was suspended very high, the views were breathtaking, and the summit was getting closer with every minute. When I got off and took my first step on the snow, I felt that something was different, as if a fairy tale had become too real. Illusion? Delight? Or maybe fear? I realized that I was having trouble breathing. I was at the highest point in Europe accessible by cable car, at an altitude of 3,084 meters. This is my personal journey. I invite you, reader, to join. This book is not a typical guidebook. You will not find dry data on accommodation prices or a list of restaurants recommended by algorithms. That is not the point. This is a review of places worth knowing, but not in the way they are usually written about. I do not suggest where. Sleep, because I believe that everyone travels in their own way. Everyone stays where their heart tells them. Sometimes in a hotel with a view of the Alps, sometimes in a car under the stars, and sometimes just for a moment, stopping somewhere along the way. This book is for those who are not just looking for information, but for emotions, memories, and a personal rhythm of discovering Switzerland. Around me, snow, ice, a glacier, and inside me, terror, excitement, and the question, what now? How will I cope? In this place, a completely new story of my travels began. A story that does not end with a photo or at the summit. I walk. Then among the old wooden houses that looked like they were from another era. I passed the famous street leading from the train station towards the center. One thing particularly surprised me. In the entire town, only small electric vehicles moved. At first I couldn't understand it. Where are the cars? Only later did I learn that Zermatt is a town closed to combustion engine traffic. It was my first encounter with the idea of a completely silent city, and it made a huge impression on me. It was then too, for the first time, that I heard about the Glacier Express, the legendary train running from Zermatt to St. Moritz. The name itself sounded like something out of a fairy tale. Thought that one could traverse all of Switzerland in a panoramic train through the highest passes and alpine valleys awakened another dream in me, which, like many others, was eventually to come true. I didn't know then that I would. return here so often. That Zermatt would become my most beloved place, a space to which I return in body and heart. And that each subsequent visit would reveal the same place to me anew, the road to the unknown, about the Furka Pass, Belvedere, and the smell of brakes. And here, the real adventure begins. After a day in Zermatt and admiring the majestic Matterhorn, took the train down to Tesch, because as you know, you can't drive into Zermatt. This town is completely closed to vehicular traffic. Already in Tesch itself, there is a no-entry sign, red, informative, very telling. The road is narrow, winding, and at times quite dangerous, which is why most transport is by rail. At the campsite where we stayed, I had my first night in a tent in Switzerland. And it was an evening I will not soon forget. The tent was already pitched, the equipment packed, but it turned out that not all my adventure companions decided to set off with me into the mountains. My mother, a bit disoriented by the alpine conditions, suggested to my uncle that it would be warm. After all, we had just returned from Slovenia, where the sun was shining brightly. And so my uncle went to sleep barefoot. It was mid-September and it got really cold at night. I prepared, dressed in several layers, slept soundly. Meanwhile, in the other tent, my uncle was fighting the cold, warming himself with travel iron. In the middle of the night, my mother woke up and seeing that something was happening, asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm warming myself because I'm cold." "And why aren't you wearing socks?" "Because I didn't bring any." We started laughing. Such a small, absurd adventure, but one of those that you remember for years. This campsite near Zermatt is a cozy, quiet place that is really worth visiting. Warm greetings to our acquaintance, the friendly lady at the reception, who remembered us for a long time, especially my uncle, who talked to her, though he only spoke Polish and she only spoke German. And yet, they understood each other. A little with words, a little with gestures, and it was beautiful. Towards the end of our stay in Tesch, we pondered whether to go to St. Moritz through Switzerland or perhaps through Italy. However, remembering the difficulties we had encountered a year earlier in Italy, I looked at the route on the GPS and saw that the road through Switzerland seemed simpler. On the map, it looked quite inviting, almost 100 kilometers of highway. What happened along the way completely changed my point of view. Those landscapes, those places I didn't know then, I had no idea what awaited me there. In my head, there was only one association, the Gotthard Tunnel. I had heard that it was one of the longest road tunnels in the world. I didn't know then what it really meant. For me, it was just a road marked on the map. We set off calmly, admiring the landscapes, looking through the car window at the green valley. My uncle drove gently, carefully climbing higher and higher. Beside us, parallel to our route, ran a railway line winding between the bends. Sometimes on the right side, sometimes on the left, I saw high, almost vertical cliffs, and the road signs pointed towards Furka Pass. At that moment, it was just a name to me. It meant nothing. Like any driver, I treated it as just another road sign. I didn't foresee that this place would forever change my perception of Switzerland. I didn't yet know what Hotel Belvedere was, nor that right next to it lay the Rhone Glacier, a force of nature that would move my heart. We were driving from Visp, passing the Simplon Tunnel, a name I knew but still without emotional significance. I saw road signs directing towards Aletsch Glacier, the largest glacier in the Alps, but they too were empty for me then. Just more signs, not places. The awareness of this land was yet to be built within me. Back then, I was like anyone passing through an unknown place for the first time. I observed, without understanding. I absorbed the views, but I didn't yet feel them fully. Slowly we ascended higher, feeling almost no difference in the car's cabin. But everything around us was changing: the landscape, the air, the light. And within me, something new was awakening, something I would only later understand. Finally, I reached Obergoms, the place from which the ascent to one of the most legendary passes in Switzerland begins, Furka Pass. Before us, a ramp, unassuming, steel, yet leading to something extraordinary. This is where cars drive directly onto the train, as if the mountains themselves were inviting them inside. Then, just a ride through the tunnel, quiet, dark, straight, and on the other side, light and new landscapes once more, Furka Pass. The very sound of this name awakens something special in me. It is one of the highest and at the same time most picturesque routes in the entire Alps, but it's accessible only for part of the year, from June to October, sometimes November. In winter, the road disappears under snow and the mountains, all silent, closed, wild, impassable. Avalanches don't ask if you're ready. Then I also think of bygone days, of how a steam train once traveled this pass, the Furka Bergstrecke, its line running high right through the famous Furka tunnel. For those machines, it must have been a battle against altitude and against time. It wasn't until the 1980s that the base tunnel was built, the Furka Basis Tunnel, about 15 kilometers long, open year-round, connecting the canton of Uri with Valais. Thanks to it, a winter crossing of the Alps is possible today, precisely in the way I am experiencing it now, by car on a train, through the mountains, underground, in silence, and with the feeling that I am traveling not only through space, but through history. We continue by car. We don't use the train, though I know that later, in worse weather or during winter road closures, I will have to return here by that very railway route. Now, however, the road leads us ever higher. I notice that the incline is becoming increasingly steep. Turn after turn, we rapidly gain altitude. With each successive bend, I see fragments of the old Furka railway line, the same one that the famous Glacier Express from Zermatt to St. Moritz once travelled. I feel excitement, but also something more, a kind of tension. The road is narrow, the valley deep, and the turns seem to have no end. It grows quiet in the car. A sense of unease appears. Where exactly are we? And what awaits us further on? For a moment, I feel like turning back. But there's no turning back here. We drive on, we pass a fork. To the left, the road to Gletsch, where one can turn towards the Grimsel Pass. But we continue straight. Round us, old buildings, as if time has stopped. And suddenly, high above us, I spot a solitary building suspended somewhere above the valley. The turns climb towards it. Finally, we cross a railway line. Ahead of us, the last ascent. The engine runs smoothly, the asphalt climbs upwards. Past the building, now close. We stop. I get out, and for a moment I am silent. Still shaken, I approach the information board. Altitude 2200 meters above sea level. Name Belvedere. At that moment, I understood that I was no longer just a tourist. I stood on the edge of something extraordinary. The view takes my breath away. I see the road below, winding like a silver ribbon among the rocks. It is evening. Dusk is slowly falling, and I simply stand and absorb this image as if I were seeing the world for the first time. I stop. I look, absorbing the view. I know I must return here. Something holds me here, something draws me. I can't name it yet, but I feel that this place has something extraordinary about it. Only after returning home will I learn that it is from here that the view of the famous Rhone Glacier extends. Monumental, yet fragile. Beauty is etched in memory, but this beauty is fleeting. This is one of those places where you can see with your own eyes how the world is changing. The glacier becomes smaller year by year. Comparing today's view with old photographs and postcards, it's clearly visible. It is melting, retreating. I know I will return here. That in a few years, I will stand in this same spot and see how it has changed. But this thought is mixed with sadness, as if someone was slowly departing, day by day, millimeter by millimeter. The world is changing. The climate is changing. With them, something that seemed eternal is disappearing. The glacier is melting, and we, along with it, pay a high price for the decisions we make every day. And now, something bigger begins. Just one last ascent to the Furka Pass, and a great adventure that I will never forget. I have mentioned this place before, but now I know why it is so important to me. The awareness of all this, the landscape, the history, the transience mixes with a simple human observation. Because once, friends laughed, saying that Switzerland stinks. Back then, I didn't understand what they meant. Today I know they weren't talking about exhaust fumes nor about hot breaks. They were talking about something more familiar. The smell of cows grazing on the alpine pastures. A cow in the pasture, seemingly nothing, yet everything. Cheese, bells, milk, life in the rhythm of nature. It is as much a part of the Swiss landscape as glaciers and tunnels. It is the scent of humanity's childhood, a world that endures despite everything, despite climate change, despite us. After a while, we reach the pass, 2,036 meters above sea level. I get out, I stand, a moment of silence. Nothing around, only wind, rocks, space, and that breathtaking view that stays under your eyelids for years. We descend slowly, and then, unexpectedly, that smell again, but no longer from pastures, not from the cows, only from our car. Familiar metallic aroma of overheated brakes, which I mentioned earlier, and we laugh. Because although once this smell was terrifying to me, today it is like a hallmark of my Swiss road. Yes, Switzerland can smell like burnt brake pads. And maybe that's why I remember it so well. Because not everything that is important has to smell like roses. Sometimes the most beautiful memories are born where the world smells real. This is how I now remember my first adventure in Switzerland. Zermatt and the majestic Matterhorn and stinky brakes. Two scenes, so different, and yet it was they that made me fall in love with this place forever. And ahead of us was still the road through the Gotthard Tunnel and visiting St. Moritz. Important, beautiful, worthy of remembrance. But it is these first moments that will stay in my memory forever. They became a symbol of my beginning in Switzerland, simple, unassuming, yet full of emotion. To this day, I believe that no travel agency can organize such a vacation as we create ourselves, sometimes accidentally, not even knowing exactly where we are going, without knowledge of the terrain, without checking altitudes, without plans or landmarks, and maybe that's why it was all so real. Back then, I didn't know that such unique places awaited me in this part of Switzerland. I didn't know that I would conquer heights I had only read about before. But it wasn't the numbers and maps that were most important. It was the moments, full of surprise, laughter, silence and reflection. It is through such events that we learn what mountains are, how to find ourselves in them, and how to understand the meaning of existence. After crossing the Furka Pass, we descended to Real, a place where, after such an intense route, we simply had to stop. We needed a moment of respite, physical and emotional. Each of us felt it. We stopped to rest, relax, and eat something. I took out the gas canister, boiled water, and made tea. We all sat by the car, looking at the map spread out on the hood. The region we were in, around Andermatt, the Gotthard Pass, Oberalp Pass, is a key alpine junction, a historical passage between the north and south of Europe. At that moment, however, all of this was just dry information to me. The town, it's there, road signs, they're there, nothing more. Until I remembered a documentary I had once watched about the railways in Switzerland. It mentioned the famous Gotthard Tunnel. It was then that I first realized that there was also its road counterpart, long, impressive, even mythical. Out of curiosity and partly from a yearning in my heart, decided I have to see it. After a short rest, after analyzing the map and a moment of reflection, I set the navigation for Highway Gotthard Tunnel. I thought it would be an ordinary tunnel, maybe a few kilometers, a quick drive through, and that would be it. Nothing extraordinary. Fortunately, I wasn't the one behind the wheel then. My uncle was driving, who, as it turned out, also didn't quite know what awaited us around the next bend. I, calmer, relaxed, admired the views. I didn't expect it to be such a peculiar experience. We got on the highway and headed towards the Gotthard Tunnel. It was already late afternoon. The route took us south, towards Milan, Lugano, to the canton of Ticino. On the other side of the mountains, a completely different Switzerland awaited. The drive through the Gotthard Tunnel was one of the highlights of that day, alongside the majestic Matterhorn and the Furka Pass. Now it was time for something completely different. Gotthard, the famous road tunnel. The entrance looked like any other, an opening in the mountain, signs, lights. But only now do I know that this tunnel is a full 17 kilometers long. It is one of the longest road tunnels in Europe, an important transit point connecting Milan with Zurich. It was evening. An ordinary day of the year, but extraordinary in my journey. We entered the tunnel. Only safety announcements could be heard on the radio. Every now and then, changing speed limit signs flashed. The cars moved calmly, at an even pace, both from the opposite direction and in front of us. No one was in a hurry. We also drove slowly, focused, as if a little intimidated by the scale of this undertaking. And then an unexpected detail appeared that stuck in my memory. A message about the elevated temperature in the tunnel. It got warmer with every minute. I looked at the thermometer. It was almost 40 degrees Celsius in the car. Stuffy, thick air, nervous glances. No one spoke loudly, but everyone felt it. Fortunately, the passage went smoothly, though in a tense, slightly unsettling atmosphere. After exiting on the other side, towards Ticino, we breathed a sigh of relief. There was something not only technical but also symbolic about the tunnel, as if we had crossed a border not only geographical but also emotional. We were nearing the end of our Swiss journey. Ahead of us was the last stage, an encounter with the world of luxury and elegance, but also a clash with reality that I will remember for a long time. Driving up the Giulia Pass, my third, on this trip, I felt like I was approaching a place from another fairy tale. I was surrounded by landscapes known from films, guidebooks, memories and dreams, monumental mountains, winding serpentines, and an elusive premonition that around the next bend, something extraordinary begins. This is how I remember St. Moritz, a legendary town I had read about in books and seen in films. For years, it existed in my imagination as an inaccessible enclave of luxury, a world of glitz, sporting legends, Olympic splendor, and boutiques with watches whose prices are not spoken aloud. Meanwhile, when I arrived here for the first time, I didn't feel intimidated. I felt curiosity. What is really hidden behind this facade? Is St. Moritz as I imagined it? And then a Bernese mountain dog appeared. Ran out to meet us right by the guest house where we had a reservation. It stopped in front of us and looked carefully, as if it wanted to warn us. There was something strangely prophetic in that look. A moment later, everything became clear. Our reservation, although confirmed, only existed in the system. The rooms were already occupied. The staff tried to help, but to no avail. We stood tired, disoriented, a little disappointed. We wondered, was it worth coming here? And yet, even in this uncomfortable situation, St. Moritz did not cease to fascinate me. I was in the heart of the Engadine, looking at the lake, which freezes in winter and becomes an arena for horse races, and in summer it glistens with sails and sunlight. That day it was quiet, foggy, rainy, but it was this melancholy that emphasized the charm of the place. The town looked as if slightly asleep. Elegant shop windows full of watches and perfumes, empty streets, silence. Luxury here had a different rhythm. It was not a show, it was a backdrop. There was no accommodation, but there was something more. Reflection. An understanding that luxury is not a place, but a state of mind. That evening I managed to find accommodation in Tyrol on the Austrian side. We returned tired, but richer for something we hadn't planned. A real encounter with the myth. The next day, we returned. I wanted to look at this place once more calmly, with greater awareness. Took the cable car up to the famous Piznaya, the peak from which the alpine downhill races of the World Championships are held. And then everything fell into place. The panorama was breathtaking. The mountains became a stage, light, emotion. The magic of the place remained. Everyone talks about St. Moritz as a city of the wealthy, luxurious shops, crowds on the streets, elegant boutiques and cars. For me, however, it is something completely different. It is a quiet town nestled in the mountains in the heart of the Engadine Valley, a place I want to return to, not for prestige, but for the views, the silence, and the sun. I looked at the panorama with a view of Piz Bernina, walked through the streets, tried Swiss chocolate, admired the light reflecting off the mountain peaks. This city has something about it, peace, lightness, and light. It is not without reason that it is said that for over 300 days a year, the sun shines here. For me, it doesn't matter whether this place is considered luxurious or ordinary. After all, each of us is simply a human being looking for something beautiful, a space where you can relax, breathe, and forget about everything else for a moment. This is how I perceive St. Moritz. Not as an elite resort, but as a personal haven. Analyzing these events today and looking back at all the years since I began my travels through Switzerland, I must admit it clearly, Switzerland has changed me. It allowed me to understand what it means to follow your own path and realize dreams, even those that seemed unattainable. Switzerland captivates, regardless of the place. It doesn't matter if you are in a luxurious hotel, on a pass high in the Alps, or in a tiny mountain hut. Here, prestige and the rank of the restaurant do not matter. something more matters. Nature, beauty, the climate, and the atmosphere that penetrates a person to the core. This is how I can summarize it. Switzerland is not just a country on the map, it is a state of mind.